Hey everyone, and welcome. As scuba instructors, we're always looking to push our skills to the next level. So today, we're diving into a topic that opens up a whole new underwater world: adaptive scuba for divers who are blind. Think of this as a quick professional briefing on the techniques, the challenges, and honestly, the incredible rewards of teaching someone to dive without sight.
Okay, let's just get right to it. The first question that pops into pretty much every instructor's head is this one. Is it actually safe? And look, that's a totally fair question. So much of what we do underwater is based on what we see. And the answer is a huge, resounding yes. The thing is, great diving is way more about tactile feelings, about buoyancy, about communication with your buddy, than it is about sight. For years, agencies like the Handicapped Scuba Association and PADI have been safely training and certifying blind divers. It's not about what you can see, it's about the systems you have in place. So here's our dive plan for this session. We'll start with the foundation of how this is all possible. Then we'll pinpoint the specific challenges. After that, we'll open up the adaptive toolkit, all the solutions. We'll even look at a formal way to manage risk, nail down your role in all this, and finally, touch on how this can totally change your perspective on diving. First up, let's talk about that foundation. How do we build a framework for safety when the one sense we rely on most underwater just isn't there? Well, it's all about making a deliberate shift, moving away from relying on sight and instead building on a system of other, just as reliable factors. Right, so here's the thing. Safety isn't some magic bullet. It's built on these core pillars, all working together. It all, and I mean all of it, starts with a strong, well-trained buddy team. From there, the training itself has to be adapted, focusing on touch and feel. Then you layer on formal risk controls. We'll get to those. And of course, you've got to be smart about where you dive. This isn't just making it up as you go. It's a proven system, backed by the biggest agencies out there. Okay, so before we jump into all the cool solutions, we have to be super clear about the problems we're actually solving. What are the specific, predictable obstacles a diver without sight is going to face the moment they dip below the surface? These are pretty much the big five. How do you know which way is up without seeing the sun or your bubbles? How do you signal I'm low on air? Or avoid touching fragile coral you can't see? How do you manage all your gear? And the big one, how do you respond in an emergency? Every single one of these needs a non-visual answer. And that brings us to the best part of this whole talk, the adaptive diving toolkit. Now, these aren't just theories, these are field-tested, proven techniques that directly solve every single one of those challenges we just listed. So let's gear up and take a look inside. Now, this slide is fantastic because it shows a complete paradigm shift. We basically throw out our entire library of visual hand signals. Instead, we use a pre-briefed system of tactile signals. A certain number of taps on the arm, a specific squeeze. Instead of seeing our buddy, we maintain light physical contact. And to get attention, a simple tank banger works perfectly. The communication doesn't stop. It just changes its language. Equipment familiarity. Okay, this one is huge. Absolutely non-negotiable. Before any dive, you do a full tactile tour of the gear. You literally guide the diver's hands over every single valve, hose, buckle, and dumb valve until they can find and use everything purely by muscle memory. This builds an incredible amount of confidence and real-world competence. And the toolkit just keeps going. We have techno like dive computers that beep or vibrate at certain depths. We can modify gauges so they can be read by touch. We use rope guides for super controlled descents and ascents. Even the buddy's position just slightly ahead and to the side becomes a navigation tool. And our briefings, they become incredibly rich and descriptive, sometimes even using little 3D models of the dive site. Okay, so we've got all these amazing tools, but how do we prove they make diving safe? Well, this is where we move from just being careful to being professionals. We use a systematic approach to risk, a structured, repeatable process to assess and manage any potential problems before they happen. We use the standard industry formula, which I'm sure you've seen. Risk is simply a product of severity, how bad would it be, and likelihood, how likely is it to actually happen. This gives us a number we can work with to prioritize and manage any hazards. And this table shows exactly how it works in practice. Let's take that delayed emergency response hazard. Without any special training, the severity is catastrophic, let's call it a 5, and the likelihood is a 2. That gives us a risk score of 10, which is pretty high. But look at the control measures, a tactile signal system and lots of practice. So we start here, an initial risk score of 10. That's a medium-level risk that we absolutely have to deal with before anyone gets in the water. So now we apply our toolkit. We get in the pool and we drill those tactile signals for out of air or help me until they're instant, second nature. The buddy knows exactly how to respond because it's been practiced over and over by touch. This directly attacks the likelihood part of our risk equation. And would you look at that? By putting those simple practice controls in place, the new risk score drops all the way down to a 3. That's a low-level risk, well within the acceptable range for any fun, recreational dive. We didn't get rid of the hazard, you can't, but we systematically managed it. That is the heart of adaptive safety. So, what does this all boil down to for you as the instructor or the dive buddy? Let's take everything we've talked about and distill it into a really clear set of responsibilities. This is your game plan. Think of this as your final check. You've got to maintain the proper buddy ratio, often 2 buddies for 1 blind diver, especially in open water. Make sure everyone on the team is trained in these techniques. Use that touch contact method all the time. Be conservative and smart with your dive site selection. Calm, simple, and sheltered is the way to go. And remember, every single skill you teach has to be adapted so it can be learned by feel. And finally, I want to talk about what happens when you get all this right. Because it's about so much more than just procedures and checklists. Teaching a blind diver can fundamentally change your own perspective on what it even means to be underwater. And this quote it nails it. Because they can't rely on their eyes, blind divers often develop an incredible, almost supernatural sense of buoyancy and trim. They're so much more tuned in to pressure changes, to sounds, to the feel of the water moving around them. They prove that sometimes our own reliance on vision can be a bit of a crutch. So I'll just leave you with this question. As instructors, we're so used to being the ones doing the teaching. But when you have the chance to guide a student who experiences our world entirely through touch and sound and trust, you become the student too. So what could you learn about diving, about buoyancy, about communication from a student who truly feels the water? Something to think about.